Hi, Comeback Game Nation. Barry William McGlady here, your host of the Comeback Game podcast. Today, I'm privileged to have James Whittaker on the call, who was the executive producer of Think and Grow Rich, the movie, and also given the sole rights to recreate the book, Think and Grow Rich, The Legacy. James has got a fascinating story growing up, experiencing an overwhelming amount of anxiety that actually paralyzed him and crippled him from experiencing many things in life. Coming from a good family, he was unsure for a long time why this experience was happening to him, but also it was one of the greatest gifts in what it opened up to him and the opportunities he had later on in life. We dive into understanding the difference between performance psychology and scarcity psychology, how it relates to finances, relationships. We also dive deeply into understanding what are some of the better ways you can be structuring your finances right now based on the current COVID-19 pandemic. Even more than that, we start to talk about entrepreneurship and around the mindset and the self-expression that comes through when we finally stop worrying and thinking and caring about what other people think of us. So if you're a budding entrepreneur or a business owner that's looking to expand your mindset, move to a whole new level and maybe break through some of those limiting beliefs and some of those things that have held you back for so long from living your life on purpose and living your life powerfully, I trust this interview is going to resonate with you. Also, James has been kind enough to give us some of his books to give away. So for the best 3 comments on what your top takeaways were from this interview, James is personally going to sign these books and send them out to you as well. So comment below whether you're seeing this on Facebook, on Instagram, on YouTube, or any of the other platforms. Comment below what was your number 1 takeaway, and one of my team will go through and send the top 3 comments one of James's books. Look forward to seeing you on the other side. Bye for now. Hey, today we've got James Whittaker all the way from Brisbane, Australia. How are you doing this morning, mate?
I'm good, thanks, mate. How are you?
Mate, I'm excited to dive into an episode with you, actually.
Awesome. I'm very happy to be here.
Yeah. So, mate, for the people that may not have come across you yet, do you want to just give a little bit of a brief background about who you are and what it is you do?
Well, I grew up in Brisbane, beautiful place, obviously in Australia. So I've been living in America for the last 7 years. So, I spent 10 years in financial planning in Australia. And then I actually moved over to America, over to Boston to study an MBA, a master's degree of business. Before that, I had about 4 months of backpacking around South and Central America for a bit of soul searching, which was good fun. And for the last 7 or so years since I finished that degree, I feel like everyone goes into an MBA with a plan. And it was like a washing machine where it chewed me up and just spat me out in all sorts of different directions. But over the last few years, what I've really been enjoying doing, I was a executive producer for a movie based on Think and Grow Rich, which is the best-selling self-help book of all time. Of course, the book by Napoleon Hill, which was written in 1937 and sold more than 120 million copies around the world. And I also wrote a modern version of that, also called Think and Grow Rich, The Legacy. So we had the film and the new book coincide when they were released. So, and also have a new book coming out in September, which is with Andrew Carnegie and Napoleon Hill, which is a little bit weird it's actually the original interview from Think and Grow Rich in 1908. They asked me to go and edit and annotate that one. So, it's pretty amazing and a little bit surreal, to be honest, to be living in LA and doing projects with some of the most successful and some of the most well-known conversations of all time.
Wow. How did that executive producer's role first come about for you? Like, it's a little bit of a different from being a financial planner, right?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, it was quite bizarre. Well, I hadn't written a book for young people to manage their personal finance. So I had an opportunity to meet the filmmakers about 4 years ago, I think it was. Obviously this year's flown very, very quickly. I had the opportunity to meet the filmmakers in Santa Monica, and they were just telling me about this project that they had. And they said, "We love your energy. We'd love to have you involved in the project. Just tell us how you could be involved." And I said, "Well, you're obviously releasing a new book with this film." And they said, "Yeah," but they were just very vague on the details. And I gave them a concept. I said, "Well, there's 13 principles of Think and Grow Rich. People these days don't naturally identify as much with people like Henry Ford and Thomas Edison and Andrew Carnegie as much as I do with people from today's generation." So I thought, well, why don't we provide an overview of each principle in a modern context and then feature people like Barbara Corcoran and Rob Dyrdek and we got a whole heap. We've got NFL Hall of Fame players. We've got a really eclectic mix of people. Janine Shepherd is an Australian who's a phenomenal story. She was hit by a truck and has done a TED Talk with millions and millions of views. Her videos have got more than 1 billion views online. So to be able to have the opportunity to do that was amazing, because they called me a few days later And they just said, look, tell me more about this book concept. And I said, if I was you, this is what I would do. And they said, can you do it? And they already had a copy of my previous book. And I said, yes, I'll knock it out of the park. And that was the moment I got involved as executive producer of the film and author of the book.
Yeah, wow. To many that are watching or listening to this right now, they might see that you're a very lucky guy. You know, an opportunity like that's kind of fallen in your lap. It's created a significant shift in direction for you and path and opened up a lot of doorways. But I can imagine that, like, we know that luck doesn't exist per se. So give us a bit of a background. Like, what were some of the challenges or adversities that you've overcome in life, or that you've faced, or you've been through, that you think in many ways prepared you to have that experience out in Santa Monica?
Well, there was so many. I feel like one of the biggest misconceptions that if someone's born to a good family, or they're born with money, or they're born in the right country, then you know, or they have the right husband or wife or boyfriend or girlfriend, then it's game over, or they get an OP1 at high school. There's all these different things that you can get where everyone else thinks, wow, that person is lucky and everything is perfect. But as you and I know, and hopefully everyone listening know, I don't think there's a single person who reaches the age of 30 without facing significant adversity.
Yeah.
And the thing that really struck me, actually, I really say that when I was 23 years old, that was the biggest turning point in my life, because for about 7 or 8 years before that, I had these really debilitating battles with anxiety, which was so weird for me because I grew up in a beautiful place like Australia. I was going to a good school. I had a loving family. And I just had these situations where if I felt like I was in an environment where I couldn't escape from, or if something was really, really important. And when I was, you know, in high school at this stage, so doing things like preparing for the exams that are going to take you to university, which they tell you is what will define the rest of your life. I would have these situations where I would faint and often throw up. And it's a really embarrassing situation. You feel totally humiliated. Anyone who's gone through it knows exactly what I'm talking about. It's a bit like anyone who's had, you know, really bad back pain. Once you've had that once, you have instant empathy for anyone who's ever gone through that before. And the only way that I could get through that was if I decided not to care. So that was my life for many, many years. I just decided not to care. I barely, you know, I did okay in high school, not okay. Like, I was very much in the middle of the road. And then I got into university with an arts degree, which is the only degree that I could get into because I didn't have good enough marks for the other degrees. And that was at UQ, the University of Queensland, where I wanted to go because all my friends were going there. And that was it. That was the way I could get through, was when I decided that I just wouldn't care about it. That was just what freed me up mentally. And I was clearly in survival mode. And when we talk about Think and Grow Rich, of course, we can see it works in the complete opposite, Think and Grow Poor. That's what I was doing, thinking and growing poor, but I just didn't understand the physiological symptoms around anxiety in a way that I could get through it. So when I was working part-time at a bottle shop, I had a moment where I was rostered on alone to basically work at this bottle shop. And I knew it within about 22 minutes. I knew that if it was going to happen, it would happen then. And sure enough, it did. Probably the worst one I'd ever had. I threw up and I fainted. And it's just so embarrassing when you've got to tell the boss on a Sunday morning, who's got to leave his family to come in to look after, you know, to take over the store so I could go home, because I was too embarrassed to tell him what was going on because I didn't even really understand it myself. And that was when I really broke down. I was absolutely inconsolable and just, you know, I had so many dark thoughts as I had done. They were just getting more and more. You see these people have got very successful jobs and relationships and their lives are massively on track and everything's going great. I could barely attend university. I couldn't hold down a part-time job. I was, you know, not treating myself very well in any way, certainly with negative self-talk and not eating well. And it was at that moment where I basically, you know, planted a flag and said to life, come and get me. And that was it. It was actually a conversation with my own mother, who was the only person in the world I trusted to really share my feelings with. And she said, you have everything you need to succeed right here and right here. And she tapped my head and my heart. And that was it. I didn't use any medication. I didn't use anything at all. And that was probably the most defining moment of my entire life, where nothing changed outwardly from that point. But I made the decision from then on that I would never let anything happen to me again. And that was the journey of consuming every single thing that I could find on peak performance and you know, high performance habits and everything. So that was what happened. So 9 years later, when I had the opportunity to meet these people, I had been on a 9-year journey. I'd interviewed a whole bunch of very well-known people. I'd already written a book. I'd managed a company with more than $2 billion under management. So I was very much on the right trajectory. I guess it was a bit like a V, where I was really going downhill fast up until the age of 23. And it was just very, very grateful to be able to bounce back. And because of what happened, that's why I'm so passionate about helping other people, in particular with their mental health, and having an alignment of success rather than just being successful in one area.
Yeah, yeah. Wow. Thanks so much for sharing that. The interesting thing that I heard from you, and it's not the first time I've heard it, is obviously you grew up in a good background, you know, a lot of love in the family, support from your parents. Did you ever get to the bottom of where that was coming from, that anxiety and that stuff that was coming up for you?
I think there is a part of that is genetic. So my mum had actually gone through some things like that. My father never had. So honestly, it was quite difficult for him to even comprehend and
Mm.
understand. So I do think there was a part of that physiologically, and I do still feel those. Just you can feel it, like even 1% of it at certain times. I can feel it happen, but I've just created this habit of fighting it off and conquering it for so long. I just don't think it will ever happen again to me.
Mm.
But there was also a part of that where I had an older brother, 2 years older than me, who performed very, very well academically. He was very well suited to all the things that he was doing. And that was a big part of it. I think I compared myself to him, and I compared myself to high performing friends academically. And that just made the situation a lot worse. And I feel like there's
Mm.
so many people now who they think, oh, you've got to have been in a car accident, or you've got to have been homeless, or you've got to have some type of horrible medical trauma. There are many, many, many people who are come from, normal families and are really, really struggling or are facing huge adversity. And you need to realize that you don't need to be homeless for your life to be a success. You don't need to worry about doing all that stuff. Everyone's fighting their own battle. So that's what it is.
Yeah. And I see in some ways that's the biggest killer, is this second order consequence in many ways. You know, it's like it's been promoted for so long that we've got to have had these past traumatic issues with our parents, or these, traumatic childhoods to validate or justify the excuse my language, but the fucked upness that we have as human beings. And I remember for me, many years ago, I too had a fairly decent upbringing. Sure, there was some stuff there. But I remember going through this phase where, like, I felt I couldn't share what was going on for me because no one else would understand. I was anyone like it. And I remember a very distinct moment. I went to start an NLP training, and the teacher was talking about how, the multiple voices in your head. And I was like, holy shit, other people have multiple voices in their head as well. And it was like this opening moment for me where I realized that a lot of the stuff that I'd carried and made my own and believed that no one else was like me in the world, other people were having the exact same experience. They just weren't talking about it. And for me, that was a huge opener to start to face that, to start to face what was going on inside of me, sharing it in such a way, not to get self-pity or to be a martyr, but to no longer hold that stuff inside of me. And for me, that was when things started to significantly shift and release.
It literally gave me chills as you were talking about that, because I overcame those anxiety demons that I was letting you know about. I overcame them many years ago. And it was only about a year ago, I had never really spoken about it publicly, like barely at all.
Wow.
And because I obviously, as you were saying, I still had that deep sense somewhere within, even though mentally I was in a 1,000 times better spot, there was still an element of shame inside me of having that feeling and that experience, and for various reasons. When Success Magazine were doing a profile on my book, and they asked me to do Success Magazine is one of the most read personal development magazines in the history of the world. And they asked me to write an article for them. And I thought, wow, what am I going to talk about? Because all I've been doing in my career was talking about other people and interviewing them and telling their amazing stories. And I thought, you know what? I'm just going to submit this and see what happens. So I wrote, I think they wanted 2,000 words. I think I submitted 4,000 words talking about my whole story with all these different things. They cut it back to 2,000 words. But it was a huge release for me. It was the moment that rather than telling one person, I just put it massively out there in the world. If there are people that criticize me, the more popular that you get, the more well-known you get, of course, you attract all the critics. That's totally fine. If someone wants to criticize or attack that in any way, honestly, I'm totally fine with it. Yeah. That's just what happens in the world. It was that moment, that release for me of having it out there, like you mentioned, from having that conversation and being open about it. That's what happens when we feel that shame. It's being open and having a conversation. It releases that shame that we feel within. And I feel like that is one of the most important stages of emotional maturity. And it's something that, obviously you don't want to live with regrets, but I think that would have probably saved me a little bit of mental heartache if I was able to come to terms with that many, many years ago.
Yeah, there was something a mentor shared with me, and I totally resonate with what you're sharing. And I see it a lot in our clients as well that shows up. But they said if you have pure intent and you're aware of your pure intent, it doesn't matter what other people think, right? Because you know the intent's there. And I see that what holds so many people back in life is the comparison. They compare themselves to either a future version of themselves, like where they think that they should be for the amount of effort and energy and time and money they've invested. And so they fall short, and there's a sabotage in that pattern, comparing themselves to where they're not. And there's not a full acceptance where they are, or comparing themselves to others. And so they compare their first chapter to someone else's fifth chapter. Oh, well, he's 32, I'm 32. We should be experiencing the same level of success. The reality is that we are where we are right now. And unless we can fully own and appreciate and be grateful for where we're at, how are we ever going to experience those emotions, those feelings when we get to where we want to go?
It's so, yeah, it's so true. I mean, especially as entrepreneurs, where we're putting these milestones in the future of that's when, if I achieve this, if I get 100 clients for my business, that's when I'll be successful. Maybe it's something that you put in there for your fitness or your health, whatever it might be. Maybe if I date a person who does this, that's when I'll be happy. If I had that person's body or that person's house, that's when I'll be happy. And psychologists talk a lot about like social comparison theory, where we compare ourselves to people who we believe are doing better than us, or people who we believe are doing worse than us. And that only happens in the absence of a way that we can measure our own self-worth. And it was amazing to me. It's just become more and more apparent for me over the last few years from interviewing all these people. The secret of being happy is nothing to do with in the future, and it's not found in the present. It's found by being present, whatever that might be. And I think it's so important, especially in this quarantine, isolation, pandemic thing that we have experienced for the first half of this year, at least, that taking the time to have a little bit of fun every single day is really important. And taking time to not be attached to a mobile device every single day, I think, is really important, and very, very hard to do. I'll put my hand up and say, I really struggle. My body is just always wants to reach for a phone, but especially when you've got a child, you just feel, it makes you feel even worse. So yeah, we really need to protect our mental health and be in the present as much as we can.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. It's amazing. Like, I can speak from my own journey and certainly work with a lot of people in theirs, but it's amazing what those thoughts can create. They can create, like, I guess in the day, we don't see the world the way the world is. We see the world the way that we are. We see the world through our filtering system. We can both watch a car crash and see different things. We can both experience the same weather pattern and feel different emotions. Like, we create the meaning. Like, life is meaningless, yet we are meaning-making machines in a meaningless world. And I guess when you can start to really understand that and act in that way, you realize that you have so much power to create your own reality, to create the experience that you choose to create.
Absolutely. And I think a lot of people, they're focused on what results are they getting out of each day, but you need to focus on what are the seeds that you're planting each day. And I think just doing that, again, the really big danger for entrepreneurs and small business owners is when we, especially for our relationships, if we tell our partner, look, we've got a carrot on the horizon, that's what we're aiming for. And guess what happens the moment when we get that carrot? We add another one on another horizon, and then another one, and then another one, and then another one. It's just a really challenging thing to do. So yeah, there's a lot to that around just acceptance and presence and being grateful for the things that you have in your life away from business, and realizing what you're actually doing it all for.
Yeah. And I think too, like, you're spot on. It's like, I'll be happy when I get that partner, when I get that car, when I make that amount of money. But the reality is that what actually fulfills us as entrepreneurs is a feeling of momentum, is a feeling of movement, is the feeling of growth, not the said thing. Yet so many businesses, I think, fail because they're constantly focused on the said thing and aren't enjoying the process. So they haven't got that mental and emotional stamina to keep going when things do get tough.
Yeah, it's so true. Actually, one of the things that I do every single day is I open the 5-minute journal and I write down three things that three things that I'm grateful for. And then I write down three things that would make today a win. I tell you what, like I would say about 40% of the time I put in something that's purely focused for business. Other things might be just to make sure I do a workout that day, whatever it might be. Maybe it's to make sure I cook dinner for my wife. Like there are many different things. And once you're clear on what that day looks like, which goes back to intent, which what you were talking about, and it's a huge part of what I talk about in everything that I talk about with winning the day. And then you get that feeling of accomplishment because all you're doing is just focusing on today. Look after the pennies and the pounds will look after themselves. If you just focus on what you're going to do today, don't worry about what's going on in the future. And if you're clear on where that's going to go, which hopefully anyone in business should be when you're talking about doing things like setting goals and what your mission is, and you just need to focus then on the action items that you need to do today. Focus on the work that each day requires.
Yeah.
And actually, one of my favorite quotes is, some days you're the pigeon, some days you're the statue. It's just the way it is. Some days you wake up and you feel like shit and there's not much that you can do about it. But if you try and run harder on the treadmill, you're going to get frustrated. You're going to get burnt out. I had one of those days a couple of weeks ago, and it was absolutely horrible. I even had a nap for about an hour in the middle of the day, which I never do. And I still woke up feeling horrible, but it was just another reminder for me that, look, sometimes you have these days. You don't need to set a world record every single day. Just do the best that you've got on that day.
Yeah, absolutely. And something that certainly helped me is focusing on progress over perfection. Is if every day I can go to sleep feeling like I've made a step forward, even a half a step forwards towards where I want my life to be in every area, financially, physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, relationships. It's a good day. But some days you take a few steps, you might even run for a little bit. But as you said, focusing on being clear of where you're going, but then focusing more so on being present in the now is a greater, I guess, framework for success than what we see happening a lot, which is being overwhelmed in comparison to everything else we spoke about.
Definitely. It's funny, isn't it? It's an exact science that the grass is always greener, and where I work out of, I can see it right now out of the corner of my eye. I see my neighbor's lawn. So, I think recognizing that it's a part of human nature that the grass is always greener, but yeah, so much of that just comes to being grateful for what you have and just setting an intent for the day and leave the past in the past, leave the future in the future, and just give today all you've got.
Yeah. I've got a bit of a theory. I finished writing the last chapter of my book this week. It's been a 12-week journey and nearly 90,000 words. And the last chapter was on entrepreneurship. And when I decided on the chapters, I had a bit of an idea what each chapter would entail. And this last chapter was absolutely nothing like what I entailed. I was crying as I was writing it down. And what was kind of coming through me is that I feel in many ways entrepreneurship is the greatest level of self-expression one can have, because entrepreneurs are innovative. And so therefore they have to be willing to go against the crowd. They have to be willing to do something that hasn't been done before in that innovation, and in many ways not worry about what people think. But it's only through us fully tapping into all of who we are can we express in that way. Can we express in that way from leading our company? Can we express in that way in product and service development? And I feel at the core, like entrepreneurship in many ways is a spiritual journey. It's a journey back to a higher level of self.
Yeah, I think that's really important. That massively resonates with me too. And I think people who are in the corporate world don't realize how lucky they have it when they can do Monday to Friday, 5 p.m. each day. They can turn their phones off. They get every single weekend. Whereas entrepreneurs, we could work 24/7. And at the end of each one of those days, we could, write a whole laundry list of things that we're frustrated that we didn't get done. So it's just scheduling that time to make sure we're in tune with our authentic self, as you mentioned. And certainly on the book front, I've been there many times as well, where you go in with a plan and what you end up with is something completely different. But that's the game. As long as you've got people around, whether it's an editor or someone else who can, obviously you reach a point where it's difficult to edit your own work, but I do find it's a great exercise to sit on something for a few days or a couple of weeks so you can come back and revisit it, and then you'll know you can go and make changes accordingly.
Yeah, absolutely. Curious to know, I want to switch gears a little bit. And, obviously we're going through some interesting times right now with the COVID-19 pandemic. And there's obviously a huge second order consequence to the lockdowns and things like that, outside of the mental abuse and other things that are happening right now. and that's the financial element. So I'm curious to get your take. Obviously, financial background, you've done a lot with the Think and Grow with Rich methodology. How would you advise people to be managing their money right now, both from like a mental perspective, because I can imagine people will be having some experiences having to maybe draw from super or use their savings and so forth, and then also more so from a materialistic or a physical perspective. What advice would you share?
It's a very good question. And most people, it's because of the volatility that's happening. I mean, it is, at the time we're recording this, the market is not far off its record high. And in America in particular, it was an 11-year bull market run. It was a record setting bull market run, 11 years. There was always going to be something that put an end to that. That's all part of the economic cycle. And in this instance, it just happened to be a pandemic. Very uncertain, but certainly part and parcel with the normal economic cycle. Superannuation, I am very against, in almost every case, people wanting to cash out some of their,
Yes.
the government's made that available.
Yes.
I just, you got to do something your future self thanks you for. You don't do that in reverse. And you'll always find a way inevitably to put food on the table. Like almost everyone listening, I mean, probably every single person listening would be able to find a way to put food on the table. You don't miss what you don't get. So it really is. You'd be able to figure it out. But I tell you what, when you're 65 or whenever you get older, you reach that point where you can withdraw your superannuation, you're going to be a lot happier, especially when you see what happens with things like compound interest, what that can turn into. I mean, if you're in something that conservatively, well, not even conservatively, if the market's returning sort of 9 or 10% a year, your money's going to double. Like, it's amazing if you go and look up some compound interest calculators. If your money's going to double every 7 or 8 years, it's really, really important that you've got that money in there as early as you can, because it comes back to time and rate. So I think leave your superannuation alone for most people. I do think if you've got access to a really good financial planner is important. Finding someone who is a certified financial planner qualification, as well as a member of the FPA in Australia. I think they're two good ticks to have if you want to go and find a financial advisor who can give you advice for your unique circumstances. Cashing out at the bottom is never a smart thing to do. And when I'm talking about that, I don't mean individual companies, because it's very, very difficult to advise on individual companies at the best of times. So I think if you're invested in a diverse portfolio that has wide exposure to the Australian share market or wherever you're invested, ideally you want to sell high and buy low. And often that gets reversed because of the markets run on fear and greed, and people forget that. They read a newspaper article that says the world is ending tomorrow, which has been the headlines for the last few months. And I've been really surprised that the markets haven't fallen a lot more than they had. And the market has never failed to return to its previous high. Even after everything that happened in 2007, 2009 with the global financial crisis, which in America is called the Great Recession, interestingly enough, the market has never failed to return to its previous high. So if you can get access to an index fund that's 30% off or 40% off or even more off its previous high, I think that is a fantastic time to buy. It really is. And there's a lot of things that you can do around that, where if you've got record low interest rates like we're seeing in a lot of countries now, there are different things that you can do even around margin loans to really, really benefit from that. There's a lot of work you need to do around loan to valuation ratios and things to make sure you're not exposing yourself too much. I think it's really important for people to have an emergency surplus. You don't want to be investing money and finding out that you need to access it quickly, and you've invested in something. Maybe you've got too much money in real estate and you can't, the liquidity is not there when you need it. So there's a lot of different things. And I think also focusing on developing your skills and cutting your costs and thinking long-term as much as you can. Where in this moment, most people are thinking paycheck to paycheck. What am I going to do to put food on my family's table for the next month? As much as you can, think long-term. Don't be an Uber driver. Be an expert in the technology that runs Uber and will run a heap of other companies in the next 5 or 10 years. Be an expert in logistics technology rather than being an hourly driver for Uber, where obviously your job is going to go once automation comes in. Yeah.
I think something really important, there was a lot of great stuff you just shared there, James. Thank you so much for that. I think one thing that I really got from that, that I see is so important, is the difference between thinking short-term and long-term. there's a lot of people have jumped into the fact that, oh my God, this is the way it's going to be. The whole population is going to be wiped out. The market's going to crash and not return. Like, the world has been through a lot, and you've only got to look back into history to see that every time we recover, we come stronger and better for it. Right. And the market is no different in that. So don't make a short-term decision based from scarcity to do something. And the other thing you said too is, like, when have you not had enough? When have you not had food on the table? When have you not had what you've needed? So don't make a stupid and rash decision to go and pull out everything you've worked for or saved for or put in just to survive. Look at other ways of doing that. And I think that, like, I know we follow the Profit First approach by Mike Michalowicz.
Love it. Yeah, I wrote about that recently. Yeah.
Yeah. Phenomenal. Richest Man in Babylon, similar principles, and Barefoot Investor for personal wealth. But the whole point is to create pressure to cause us to think differently. And it's like, when we just go and pull money back out of savings, when the first time we can't afford to pay our bill, not only do we prevent or limit that system working well through compounding interest, but we actually create neuro pathways that make it easier for us to do that in the future.
Yeah, it's like credit cards and casino chips. Yeah, like I said, you don't miss what you don't get. If you can make sure out of every single paycheck, you've got something going to a different account that you can't touch, which is like what they talk about in Profit First. If it's something money that comes into the company that you don't have access to, you don't miss what you don't get, and you're forced to make the most out of the situation. It's the reason Apple, big IT company, was so successful. They didn't have the resources that Hewlett Packard and these other companies had. They had to succeed with what they had, and they got very, very good at getting the most out for the least amount of money in. So, I think that's really important.
Yeah, we typically tend to, by nature, follow the path of least resistance. Yet if that path of least resistance is blocked, we have to find another way. Like, us as human beings, we're very resourceful, and we will find another way. But we first must put some barriers up and some borders around. Like, we're not going to touch our super. Like, I saw the government was advertising, like, hey, pull 10 grand out of your super and reinvest it back into small businesses. I'm like,
it's crazy. The reason superannuation exists is because the government doesn't have enough money to fund people's retirement. So it's there for a reason.
The government's the one giving you advice on how to spend your money.
That's right. Yeah, it's there for a reason. So I'd much rather be resourceful about what you can do to either cut your costs or make more of an income in the present, and leave that superannuation knowing that it's going to be there for you in the future.
Yeah. Look, we're massively resourceful. And I believe as human beings, we are far more capable than we ever realized possible. And it's good to kind of challenge yourself every now and again. As you said, like, we always have what we need to survive. That's always there. So find other ways, ring people, reduce debt, reduce loans, get rid of stuff that you don't need, and then focus on creating wealth. Absolutely. James, last question. If you were having a conversation with the 6-year-old version of you, what advice would you give him?
Oh, it's a very good question. And it's funny because I feel like the me is actually, I feel like I've been reborn about 3 or 4 times in my life, when you just have different initiations into business and the world of family and just, I think, being a teenager as well. I would say trust yourself and trust the future. I think that's really important when you get wrapped up in wanting to do what other people, the perception, especially when you're younger, of what you think is cool from what other people are doing. And you find out when you wake up one day that you don't even know who you are anymore. So really getting in touch and I guess staying in touch, if you're 6 years old, staying in touch with who you are, and then trusting that the future will work out if you take the right actions today.
I love that. Trust yourself and trust the future. James, it's been an absolute pleasure. How can the guys and girls watching, listening to this today, find you or check out some of the cool stuff that you do?
I guess Instagram is probably a good one. Just go to James Whitt, JamesWhitt, or jameswhitt.com. The same spelling as my website. If I can be of assistance to anyone at all, just send me an email or reach out, and I'll do what I can.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, mate. It's been an absolute pleasure.
My pleasure, mate. Thanks for having me on.
If you're in a position that many of our clients were before joining us, which is that your business is controlling you rather than you controlling your business, we would love to have a chat to you to see whether or not we might be the right fit to partner with you to help you grow and succeed in business. And over the past 8 years, we've helped hundreds of business owners around the world to grow, scale, and succeed in business. Many of our clients report that we've helped them to triple their profits and double their time off in 12 months or less. If you jump onto YouTube and notice the hundreds of testimonies, you'd see that this is a common theme amongst them. If you're a business owner that's generating more than $300,000 a year in annual revenue, whether it's $500 million, $5 million, even $10 million a year, and you're looking to take your business and your life to the next level, we might be able to help. If you're noticing that your business is lacking structure, maybe systems or processes, maybe you're not quite attracting enough or the right type of quality leads, making enough sales, or maybe you're even having issues finding, hiring, retaining, and training the right team members, we could be a fit for you. Ultimately, we believe that we never have business problems, we have personal problems that are expressed through our business, and a lot of the work we do is with you as a business owner, helping you to constantly upgrade the way that you see life, the way that you make decisions, and the way that you help construct a profitable and purpose-driven business. In order for us to do that though, you need to book in a quick 15-minute application call with one of our scaling specialists here at the Game Changers. Through that 15-minute call, we're going to ask you a bunch of questions to see if or how we might better help you. If we can't help you, we'll let you know politely and do our best to point in the direction of someone that can. However, if we can help you, we'll look at booking you a 1 hour game plan session where we're going to dive a lot deeper into where you and your business are at right now, where it is that you want to go in the next 3, 5, and 10 years' time, and what are the potential roadblocks or challenges or even opportunities that are along the journey in order for you to get there faster. If you're really feeling that it's time for you to experience the love and the joy of running a business again, if you're really wanting to experience a business that does actually operate without you while still producing profit, we may very well be the right fit. So book in a 15-minute call, we can have a chat and see where we go from there. My name is Barry Whittaker, and thanks for listening. Hopefully we'll get a chance to talk soon.